13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
Okay, guys, welcome back to 13 Questions. We're going to be chatting with David W. Matheson a little bit later, a friend of both of ours. Been on our other podcast a couple of times. We became friends. He's an author, a bunch of other great things. He was in the Army. So yeah, Grant will do the bio in a little bit. Yeah, it's a fun interview. Give us some great, insightful answers. So welcome back to the show, guys. We hope you enjoyed the first two episodes. The one thing I did want to mention, this intro that we haven't mentioned yet, is that our last guest, episode 2, Superman, Christian Takes Gun Parish, is actually the creator of the outro music. We didn't know when we recorded the intro that we were going to be using that music yet. I just spoke to him a few days ago and he cleared that up. So that's the outro music, Why by Superman, who was guest in episode 2. Great song. Join up, sign up. We do the free show here. You get 13 questions. We'll run through all those. It takes anywhere between a half an hour and 40 minutes. Some go a little longer than that. And then we do the bonus questions and stuff like that for our subscribers, for our members. It comes along with a lot of stuff other than just that. If you head over to 13questionspodcast.com, on the sign-up page, you see everything we offer there. You can do it on a monthly, yearly, or lifetime basis. Monthly $777, yearly $77.77, or lifetime $777. And aside from getting the extensions to the podcast, 2 episodes a week, so you get 2 extensions per week. You get a weekly newsletter from our team with journaling prompts aimed at self-discovery and improvement. You get some bonus episodes to the podcast, additional episodes. You get exclusive content from our affiliates, such as currently we're running the 5 different communication courses from TJ Walker, totaling over 100 hours of content, hundreds and hundreds of dollars of value right there you get for free just for signing up. You get a live private Discord chat room for members only, and you get members only forums. And of course, the biggest one, what I think the biggest one of all, is the ability to record your own fathers, grandfathers, bosses, brothers, sisters, yourself. Yeah. Tough to interview yourself. Maybe you can interview your buddy, get your buddy to interview you.
That's a good idea.
Anyway, you record your own answers to the questions, your own podcasts, send them in to us. We'll review them. If the audio is up to snuff, then we'll release them either as a bonus episode for our members or as for the free show. You get the ability to sort of, cement somebody's place in history. Because we all know one thing, once stuff goes on the internet, that's it.
Maybe we'll try to split those up like we do with the normal ones, The normal questions, we'll edit it into like an extra questions being...
Yeah, we could. Yeah, absolutely. If they do the whole bonus thing and everything like that, then we could run it like that where it's a normal episode, or we could do it as bonus episodes when we have too much content.
Yeah.
All sorts of different possibilities. Yeah. But I mean, personally, I think that's the biggest one. I would have loved the ability to send in an episode to my favorite podcast. So we got David Matheson coming up today.
Yep.
He's a friend of ours, of course, personal friend of ours down in California.
Yeah.
Fascinating guy, star guy.
Yeah, oh yeah. Coffee table book of the star myths. So Dave's a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy and the U.S. Army's Ranger School, and he was a platoon leader and a jump master in the 82nd Airborne and a company commander in the 4th Infantry Division before getting an opportunity to return to West Point to teach in the Department of English and Philosophy. He's always been a big fan of ancient myths and the stars and has written 8 books on the evidence that the world's ancient myths are based on the constellations and heavenly cycles. He and his wife live in California and they have 2 sons, 18 and 20, and his main website is www.starmythworld.com.
There you have it. Great guy, great answers.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything else to say. Not much else to say. Enjoy the well thought out answers by David W. Matheson. Okay, Dave, we'll start off with a nice softball one here. What was the best advice ever given to you?
Hey, Darren. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to talking. I think I'll tell you what. I've had a lot of really good advice given to me over the years, and I won't hold myself up as somebody who necessarily exemplifies all the things that that people need to be doing, or that even if I'm telling somebody some advice, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily the paragon. I'm not a guru here, but I have been around some very I have in my life been around great men, and by great, I've been around politicians and generals and things like that. But I'm talking about specifically for this one, kung fu masters, which is, I think, a lot what I want to talk about a lot more, like gaining mastery. And I've been around some kung fu masters, and so this piece of advice, actually, I hope that the kung fu master who told it to me doesn't mind my sharing it, because I think it's something that's really helpful for my life and helpful for other people's life. And he actually learned it from his kung fu master, who was a true, these guys are true masters, like true kung fu masters. And what he said was, "Don't believe me." And that's what his master told him. His master asked him, "Do you believe me?" And he said, "Of course I believe you. You know, you're my Sifu." And he said, "Then you'll never be any good. You'll never be a master." And what he means is, if it's something that someone else gives you, you have to prove it to yourself. That's what he said after that was, what his master told him was, you have to prove it to yourself. If you're doing it because you believe me, someone else, then you're just imitating me, and you're not proving it to yourself. You have to, it's never going to be your own unless you make it your own. And so I think a lot of the problems in the world have to do with accepting things on blind faith, even from, we've got people in the alternative community or on YouTube who are telling you this or telling you that, and you have to, it's good to listen to all the things that are out there, but you've got to examine it, and you've got to, don't take someone else's word for it. Even if he's the greatest kung fu master of a generation, that kung fu master said, "Don't believe me, prove it to yourself." So it doesn't matter. I think that's a lot of the problems today. And a lot of the problems of mind control is, accepting what somebody else tells you, like you're in a cult. That's what you do in a cult. And when somebody says, "Don't believe me, prove it to yourself," I would say they're probably not a cult type leader, because in a cult, the leader says, "Do what I say or else," or "Do what I say or you're nothing to me," or "Do what I say or you're nothing." And so I think that's really, it has to do with, it's not something that's outside of you. You've got we can get into it, but I've been studying the ancient myths for 9 years, and they've been twisted into, hey, you have to obey this, or you have to find this salvation that's outside of you. And I don't think that's their message at all. I think their message is, you've got it already inside of you. And if you are imitating or receiving it from outside of you, it's not something you have to go chasing after. So, you've already got the resources inside of you. Of course, you can use a kung fu master. You're never going to become a kung fu master unless you hang around with one for years and years and years and train and train and train. So you do need outside help, but in the end, you've got to make it your own. You've got to find it inside yourself. You can't borrow someone else's. It's got to be yours. And I'll close off this answer with, I've talked a lot about in the past about the Karate Kid scene. That still gives me chills. That's like one of those scenes that's a classic, when Mr. Miyagi says, "Show me paint the fence," and he shows him what it means. That's like one of those scenes that raises the hair on your arms. But I'll tell you another one from a completely different movie. I've never talked about this one before, but it's another one of those scenes that's a super powerful scene in a totally different movie. Have you guys seen Walk the Line?
Oh, yeah.
So that's a fantastic movie, and I'll try and relate it back to this piece of advice. It's about the life of Johnny Cash. And when he's going in for this audition, with Sam Phillips. So this is based on, a real people, obviously. Johnny Cash. Sam Phillips was this producer who was extremely influential in rock and roll and produced a lot of the records of some of the earliest rock and roll stars. But anyway, in this film, Walk the Line, it's just a fantastic scene where finally Johnny Cash, he's been like hanging around trying to get an audition, and he's in there auditioning in front of Sam Phillips. You guys remember that scene?
Yep.
And he's playing someone else's song, or he's playing a song in a way that Sam Phillips just basically cuts him off and says, "Stop it. You got anything else?" He says, "You got anything else?" And Johnny Cash gets all upset. And he says, well, "What's the matter with my song, mister?" And he gets defensive. And Sam Phillips says, "Well, I don't believe you." And he says, you gotta show me something that's really, that I believe." And Johnny Cash is like, "What? You're saying I don't believe in God?" And Sam Phillips gives this great speech. And at the end, he says, it ain't got nothing to do with believing in God, Mr. Cash. It has to do with believing in yourself. And it's just like, whoa. And Johnny Cash is like taken aback. And then he goes into this song about being stuck in Folsom Prison and watching the whole world go by on a train. And he just knows that he's stuck and the world's going on. And it's an authentic, you can see it's from the depths of his soul. And the camera is like panning in on Johnny Cash and it's panning in on Sam Phillips. And you can see that's authentic. And Johnny Cash had it inside him all the time. It was there. That was his song. In fact, his bandmates in the movie version, they're like, "Johnny, we don't even know this song." And they're like trying to keep up with it. And they do. And it's like this magical scene. It's as magical as the scene from Karate Kid. So what's the message? It's not outside of you. And it's not imitating somebody else. You've already got it inside you, but you've got to let yourself be that authentic person that you're born to be. Don't be a copy of somebody else. Somewhere I read, you were born an original. Don't end up a copy. So
Right
so
on.
there's my advice.
That's good. Well, you've answered the first 6 questions. So, so no,
Yeah, you
but
said I get what, 5 minutes?
yeah, but it is amazing how that advice given to you, probably a while ago is more applicable than ever today in today's environment, in this digital world that we're talking about. It's don't believe me, like look into it yourself, or believe, like it's very important. So we're going to move on to the next question though, is what is the most important lesson that you learned from your parents?
Oh boy, that's a great one. When I say that's a great question, I mean that's a tough question. So my parents, provided me with great examples growing up. I think the fact sticking together. My parents are still married. My parents are still active, and they're very different people, and they make it work. I think there's really something important about being loyal to one another and sticking together and helping each other out. And so I think that example that they gave me, I mean, they gave me a very stable environment to grow up in. So, the world is full of chaos, and creating a household for children to grow up in is not easy. It's super difficult. I haven't probably been as successful at creating stable environment as my parents have for my children to grow up in. But in spite of differences, I mean, there's always going to be differences between two people, especially in such close quarters, and men and women have differences, and no two people think the same way anyway, but especially after 30 years, you develop different directions, but still, fighting against that chaos and creating a stable environment through things like loyalty to each other, or care and love for each other. I don't know if that's a great answer, but
Yeah.
that's it.
I think that's a pretty great answer. Yeah, I would have to say so. Next question would be, what book has been most influential on your life and why?
Yeah, great. So I would say the immediate answer is the Odyssey, and I'll come back to the Odyssey. I'm talking about the ancient epic, the Odyssey, which I've loved since I was a kid. But I would also have to say, and you've had me on your show, The Stars: A New Way to See Them by H.A. Rey has actually changed my life because unexpectedly, it's a book that I read as a child, but the way that he sees the stars and envisions the constellations in that book opened up this whole new world of the connection between the myths and the stars that I'm pursuing. That just basically changed my perspective on everything. So that totally changed my life, that book. But back to the Odyssey is really, I think, I wrote down a few reasons because I think, thank goodness you gave me a chance to reflect on some of these in advance. But one thing about the Odyssey, so there's 4 reasons. I'll just quickly tick them off. One thing in there is it shows sabotaging yourself, and it shows you don't sabotage yourself. And in that book, you could say that basically all the characters in Odysseus's family are sabotaging themselves. Odysseus is off on this island, not necessarily through his own fault, but he's off sleeping with a goddess while his family and his household is just falling to ruins. And the self-destruction or self-sabotage is really seen in his wife and his son are both, and it's really, I don't know if you're familiar with Penelope, his wife, is at home and she's surrounded by these suitors and she is trying to hold them off. And the thing that she does that everybody remembers, or one of the things that people remember about her, is she creates this tapestry, but every night she undoes whatever she did during the day, which is, if you ask me, like the best, what a picture of self-sabotage. Like whatever the project she's working on, every night she has to destroy her work from the day. It's like you never get anywhere. It's like Johnny Cash saying how stuck he felt in his breakthrough song, right? So the Odyssey is about don't sabotage yourself. It's about getting back home and putting your life back in order when all this chaos is flooding in. But it's also about being attuned to the gods or to the divine realm, to the spirit realm. Odysseus has a lot of flaws. He's a flawed character. The reason he's not back home is in a large part due to his own inability to control his own ship, his own crew, and his own flaws, his own weaknesses or whatever. But he does have this one strength. He is attuned to the help that he gets from the divine world, and he's still got to do it. It's not like they solve the problem for him, but they give him the strength to do it. So he's attuned to that. He's not just doing it in his own strength, but and that may seem to contradict like what I said in answer number 1, but really I think that the gods help you through yourself. I think the message of the myths is you've got access to that infinite realm already within you. The gods are speaking to you to help you like get off your butt and do it. Mm-hmm. So and then the 4th thing is, so it's great for all those 3 reasons. I mean, any one of those would be reason enough to think the Odyssey is just that book could be your Bible if you want it to be. And the 4th thing is, I think the book is also a metaphor of our soul's journey down here in this lower realm, in this ocean, if you will, tossed about in the lower realm. That's what going through that flood is what actually the book is about. It's not just a literal flood, it's the flood of this life when you're coming down here into this life. So that's, it's not the easiest book, I guess, to necessarily just jump into, but it's one that I've read over and over from when I was a kid. And also I even got a chance to teach it at the college level. So
awesome.
It's just a fantastic book.
Awesome. So do you have any daily habits or rituals? And would you recommend them for others?
Yeah. Good question. So I'll give you 4 answers to that one too. And I'll move them along in the interest of keeping it moving. But one thing, so this is, I don't like publicize that I do this too much, but I like to chant every day. It's kind of Not something that we do so much in our modern society, like singing and chanting, but actually,
Nice.
like 100 years ago, there was a lot more singing. Even like my grandfather was a member of the Norwegian Club. My dad is a member of the Norwegian Club in San Francisco. I'm a member of it. They do a lot of singing. I think there's a lot of singing. Like 100 years ago, there was a lot more singing than there is today. If you play rugby, I think I've never played rugby on a rugby club or a rugby team, but rugby players all have like their rugby songs that they sing. So I think something's been lost in our culture because now we only listen to other people's songs. But I've got this quotation from a colonel who is named Colonel Richard Irving Dodge. He lived from 1827 to 1895, and he lived among the Comanche. And, he had his own 1800s prejudices and things, but you could tell he really respected the Comanche, and he lived among them for years. And he said of the Comanche, speaking in general, so when he says he's talking about the Comanche man in general. He says he loved to sing. He especially loved to sing his personal song, often written expressly for him by a medicine man, or what today we'd probably say a shaman. But his personal song was often written expressly for him by a medicine man. He often woke up singing and sang before he went to bed. And I love that quotation. It's like, how many of us get up and sing our personal song in the morning and then sing it again right before we go to bed? And actually, there's a scene in True Grit. You remember that remake of True Grit?
No, I don't know.
No.
Come on, you guys haven't seen the remake of True Grit with Jeff?
No.
No.
I think it's isn't it Jeff Bridges? Yes, Jeff Bridges is like Rooster Cogburn. Anyway, yeah, I think it won some awards, but in that movie, it's a terrible scene, but they're hanging three guys, and one guy's up there and he's just like blubbering and making a bad scene. And then this Native American, they're hanging him, and he's about to say something, and then they don't even give him a chance to speak. So they just put the hood over his head, and they're about to drop him, and he starts singing his song, and then they drop him, and they kill him. They're hanging him. But terrible scene, but it shows how important that song was to sing that song. So anyway, that was my first one. I've got 4 things to tell you, but so I like to chant every day a little bit. I don't do it in front of people. I actually do it in my car while I'm driving. But there's one. Number 2, I try and do sun salutations every day. That's a yoga thing, right?
Good idea, yeah.
I actually only do it 6 days a week. I read that you should give yourself a day off. Anyway, so I do that 6 days a week, not 7 days a week.
How many do you do?
So I do the Ashtanga. I do 6 of them actually.
6 of them, yeah.
Okay.
I do 3. So there's a book, Ashtanga for Beginners. I forget. My wife actually recommended it. It's really good. And the person who wrote it's a woman who wrote it. I forget her name off the top of my head. Maybe I'll follow up by sending it to you. But she's very good about talking about where your drishti gaze should be, where the breathing. It's really important that the breath is going in at the right time and going out at the right time, right? But anyway, I do the three kind of basic ones, and then the 3 slightly more slightly, like just the first 6, the first 2 moves basically of the Ashtanga sequence. That's it. But I do it facing the sun, and I try and do it in the morning before I eat anything, and I try and do it outside between the equinoxes, right? So on the summer, we're rapidly heading towards the darker half of the year, but during the warmer half of the year, I try and do it outside, and so I'm doing it outside right now. I do that. I do Kung Fu and Qigong every day. I think that's super important. There's this poem called the 13 Postures Song I've written about. It's a Tai Chi poem, actually, but it talks about if you don't do it every day, you won't, but at the end of your life, you'll look back and go, sighing in regret. The only way to really, I think, get mastery of something is to really do it every day. So I do Kung Fu and Qigong every day. And then the 4th thing on my 4th list is I try and do a little star walk every night. So I walk outside just in my, normal suburban neighborhood, but I try and walk around in a pattern that gives me kind of a 360 view of the horizon, so I can kind of check out and keep track of the stars throughout the year, because
Nice.
they move throughout the year. So
Yeah, yeah.
I absolutely recommend these kinds of things to people, but don't, like I said in point number 1, don't imitate me. I'm not special, and also you're not like me. So, the way I walk, something else I learned from my Kung Fu master, is you can't walk the way I walk. Everyone's gait is different.
Mm-hmm.
Learn that in the Army. You can pick someone out by the way they walk after a while, after you know them well enough, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so my things that I do every day, yours might be playing guitar, or yours might be surfing. I mean, I think you can get enlightenment or whatever, transcendence, by gaining mastery of something. And we have the chance to do it, but most of us don't do it. I'm not a master at Kung Fu. You'd have to live around a master for years, I think. But you can get whatever mastery you can, whether that's playing piano or woodworking or meditating or painting or surfing or Tai Chi or whatever it is. But I think you've kind of got to do it every day. So I would definitely recommend rituals to people, but don't just follow mine unless those are the ones that call out to you also.
Get your own rituals.
Yeah.
Next question.
I recommend them.
Next question. If I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
Yeah. So my best friend knows me really well. He knows my weaknesses. We've been friends since we were 5 years old, 5 or 6, definitely first grade, however old we were. And he just moved to being close to where I live. So we've lived all over the place and often far apart. But, one thing he would say, I was actually talking to him one time about that Odyssey thing that I mentioned to you about, how Odysseus was kind of off on that island sleeping with a goddess, and he's like, well, I don't want to sleep with this goddess, but I have to, oh drat, instead of where he's supposed to be, which is at home, taking care of getting the chaos out of his house and the suitors that are destroying his house, wanting to marry his wife, and actually plotting to kill his son. And he's off in the middle of the ocean on a paradise island sleeping with a goddess. And my best friend said to me, looked at me and said, well, what's your goddess? What are you doing that you're not supposed to be doing?
The stars.
And I said right away, well, I guess it'd have to be my writing. I can tend to doing this writing as a full-time, not full-time, but in addition to a full-time job, is obviously there's going to be some other things that are going to be being neglected, right?
Yeah.
And he looked at me and said, well, you didn't even have to pause to say that, did you? It's like, he's not telling me what it is. He's telling me he knows what it is. He's like using the Socratic method to show it to me, right? So I would say that's he's a pretty insightful judge of me after all these years, and he's probably right.
Yeah.
So I need to put I'm sitting here telling people about how to follow the Odyssey, but I've got to be following it myself, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So we've heard, you probably touched on this already a little bit, but what are you most curious about? Like, what's your real curiousness?
Yeah. So I don't even know if I came up with an answer to that. Yeah. Well, I did actually think about that a little bit. I mean, for sure, it's and it ties into what I'm driven by, right? Is the stars and the myths. Can you guys hear me okay? Because I'm hearing some.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. So just, I know you're going to maybe get back to the question of what I'm most driven by. So I'll tie it into what I'm most curious about. So on the back of almost every book that I've published, I've written, know the stars, change the world. And I really think that's true. Maybe we can get back more into that, but knowing, what does that mean? Getting to the truth of these ancient myths. I really think that in most cases, when we're stuck or when we're doing self-destructive behavior, it's because we're telling ourselves a lie, whether we've either bought into a lie. I mean, the world is feeding us lies right now, no doubt. It certainly didn't start in 2016 of the world feeding us lies. We've been the world is built on some very, right now is being propelled by some very deep lies. I mean, the 9/11 story is a deep lie, right? So, but the ancient myths, I believe, have truths. So when we're telling ourselves lies and self-destructing because of lies, we have to like replace those lies with the truth. So what am I most curious about? I'm trying to get to the bottom of what are these myths? Where did they come from? I'm curious. I put that one in the curious category because I'm not sure we'll ever know where these myths came from. But who were these ancient sages, whoever they were, who gave us these incredible myths? What were they really trying to convey in these myths? I've been groping after the answers, but I don't know for sure. I think we're all trying to repiece together a puzzle that might have been destroyed like pre-Göbekli Tepe or Göbekli Tepe time. So I don't even think, I'm not even sure the ancient Egyptians knew the answers, but we've all been trying to piece them together. So I'm really curious about where these myths came from. It goes right along with the megalithic monuments and pyramids around the world. Where did all that come from? Because it's obviously, that's the big mystery that people like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson and Robert Schoch and all these, and Bob West and all the others and women too are pursuing. And I'm convinced that getting to the truths will help us dispel the lies that are, self-sabotaging us individually and also collectively.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's what I'm curious about.
That's a good one. This one will lighten it up a little bit before we get a little heavier.
All right.
And that's what's the most embarrassing experience of your life that you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, great. I'm probably a disappointing one on that answer because I'm not easily, I'm pretty buoyant. In fact, I'm not super, my teenage sons will tell you, I'm not afraid to be embarrassing. So most of my really embarrassing things are probably when I was so drunk that I wasn't embarrassed, right? But
Yeah.
I don't recommend that to anybody, obviously, drunkenness. But I do have a few embarrassing experiences. Like I'll give you 3. So when I was really young, I really did a lot of skiing, actually. I grew up in California. My parents were skiers, and I would go up. And one time I wiped out at North Star right underneath the chairlift to the top of the mountain. There was like a chute. I think it's called the corridor or something. And I was probably like 12 or 13. And I thought I was hot shit going down this thing. And I wiped out, and my skis are like 30 feet above me on this, basically like a wall with moguls. And I'm trying to get back up to him, awkwardly. And everybody, the chairlift is like right over my head, 15 feet over my head. So everybody just like, looking down at me. And I just was really mortified. So like, I think in 7th or 8th grade, when I was asked what's my most embarrassing moment, I wrote an essay about that. But then later, when I got to high school, walking into my first day of high school, big public high school, and I'd actually gone to a private school for 7th and 8th grade. And then I decided a little private school. It was great teachers, but I decided I wanted to get back to the public school system. And so I'm walking in, I don't know anybody. And I walked into the classroom, and it was like the day, the orientation room. And on the wall, on the chalkboard, they still had chalkboards back then, it said MA-MAS. I didn't know what that meant. I actually thought it was the teacher's name. I thought maybe that was his name, Ma Moss. I don't know, Mr. Ma Moss. I don't know. But I'm sitting there, and like after a while, he like reads out everybody's name. He's like, okay, whose name didn't I call? And I raise my hand, and he points to the chalkboard, and he goes, well, Matheson, obviously you're in the wrong room. Because, yeah, hey, dummy, and it's like my first day back in public school. I know nobody. I'm in a room full of strangers, and the teacher's like embarrassing me in front of everybody.
Oh, nice.
So, but anyway, I'm, like I said, I'm pretty buoyant. And also I went to the military academy, which is kind of like mind control brainwashing and lots of humiliation. So like you get used to it. So I'll tell you, like they purposely make you in embarrassing situations. So there's I'll just share one other little funny story to kind of light story. But when I was a plebe at West Point, one time I went out of my room without my name tag on. So you got to have your name tag, Matheson, on your left chest at all times. It's part of your uniform. So I got caught out in the hall by the upperclassmen without my name tag. And they're like, "Hey, who are you?" "Sir, my name is Cadet Matheson." "No, you're not. You don't have a name tag on. You must be a secret agent." Or no, that's not what they said. They said, "No, you're the unknown soldier." Sorry, I messed up my own joke. Anyway, you're the unknown soldier. I want you to walk around the halls. So you didn't just walk, and they may have changed this by now, but you had to ping. It was called pinging. So you had to walk at this exaggerated pace. You had to square all the corners, like 90-degree angles when you're going boom, 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 boom. You'd have to walk at 120 steps per minute. It was like to make you look as ridiculous as possible. So I had to go around. They made me do laps around the barracks saying, "I am the secret agent man," at the top of my lungs. So of course, all the upperclassmen are going to like open their doors. Like, what the heck is that racket out there? Why is this ridiculous
down the hall?
Why is this ridiculous plebe yelling, I am the unknown soldier"? So I messed up my own joke again. See, I
was wondering. I was going to ask you about that. Are you the secret agent or the unknown soldier? In your head, you're the secret agent.
I'm making my own most embarrassing moment. All my West Point buddies are like, "Man, Matheson, I can't believe you're messing this up." So anyway, finally, some upperclassmen stopped me and said, "Hey, you what the hell are you yelling, 'I am the unknown soldier'? That's disrespectful. Don't you know who the unknown soldier is? The unknown soldier is, there's the tomb of the unknown soldier. You can't run around saying you're the unknown soldier. Say something else." So then I was like, so I thought for a second. I start off again yelling, "I am the secret agent man. I am the secret agent man." And, all these upperclassmen are just like laughing at me, like, "Who the heck is this guy?" And all my classmates were like, so they. Like after 4 years at West Point, they write a little blurb about you. And one of the things they wrote about me was the original secret agent man. So anyway, I messed up my own joke, but anyway, what I would say is,
it still works.
I'm not too easily embarrassed, which I don't know if that's a good trait or a bad trait, but I think that actually, Adam and Eve in the garden, I'll tie it back to some myths. They were naked and ashamed. I think that actually that whole thing is talking about our condition down in this human body is actually, it's almost a condition of embarrassment at all times. Yeah. It's like we're always kind of walking on this balancing act of not being embarrassed. Like you could be embarrassed at any moment. So don't get too hung up on it, because it's almost like that's our condition down here. Yeah. We're in this embarrassing situation. We're a spirit inside of a human body.
It'll hold you back. Yeah.
Anyhow.
What about your fear? What's your greatest fear? And how do you try and overcome that?
Yeah, shoot. I don't know. I don't like, I have this policy of not even like acknowledging them. So I'll tell you, while I was at West Point, I read this book called Hagakure. Have you guys heard of that?
No.
Probably not pronouncing it right, but so it's Japanese. It's a samurai book. It was written by a retired samurai named, I think his last name was Yamamoto, and I don't know how to say his first name. Is like Jin Iman. He's pretty famous. I mean, this is a pretty influential book, and he wrote it, I think, for his son or for his nephew. It wasn't really intended to be public, but in it, he wrote some amazing things. I mean, the samurai were obviously some pretty severe, intense, admirable in a lot of ways, but very intense. I wouldn't say that I agree with everything in Hagakure, and one of the things, but anyway, while I was a cadet at West Point, I would go to the library where they had this copy of Hagakure, and I would like write down on 3x5 cards sayings from it, and then I would like carry that 3x5 card around for a few days, and then I'd go get another one. Anyway, one thing that he says is, every morning you should imagine yourself dying like 100 different ways, falling off a cliff, like imagining yourself falling off a cliff, getting stabbed by spears, whatever, so that when it happens, it'll just be like, normal. So it's like you got to face your fears. So I think those are actually pretty good advice. So when I was a kid, I was actually really scared of things like roller coasters but I actually got over that. I remember going to Space Mountain with my parents like in 5th grade, and I was like terrified, but I went on the Space Mountain, which is not even a very scary roller coaster, but that like helped me get over fear of roller coaster. And then later on, I got into things like skydiving and like rappelling out of high towers and stuff. In the Army, I did lots of crazy jumping out of aircrafts in the middle of the night and stuff. So I'm not really telling you what my biggest fear is now, because I don't have one off the top of my head, but I guess everybody's afraid of, everybody's got fears of dying or getting, I don't know, all kinds of terrible things happen to you. But the Hagakure book basically says you have to kind of embrace that and don't be afraid of that. And actually, my most recent book, the Norse book on Norse myths, they basically said you shouldn't die. You should die fighting. And I think that actually has to do with, for us, I'm not talking about, hey, you have to
fighting, but no
fear.
fear.
You have to die in battle. But you gotta fight for truth or fight for what's right somehow in your life, even though you're afraid. Yeah. Even though you're afraid. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita actually talks about too. Arjun doesn't want to go into battle, and Krishna says, hey, you basically have to act without fear of the outcome or without worrying about the outcome. Don't worry that you won't be successful or that you just have to do it. So,
what about regret? Do you have a biggest regret?
Yeah, I've made a lot of stupid decisions and things. But I actually think that where I am, a lot of the things that I've done, that looking back, I say, well, I wish I was a literalist Christian for 20 years, from the age of about 20 to the age of about 40, almost 40, like 38, 39. And then I started realizing the connection between the myths and the stars. And that, there's things that I did or believed and enforced on my kids that, looking back, I'm like, that was so misguided. I was off on such a wrong path. In fact, it's related to, I think a lot of the things that the military is doing, it's like when I was doing it, I thought we were defending democracy and fighting for freedom. I'm not sure how you could still be in the military and think that today, but I don't regret that I did all those things.
Yeah.
I don't regret that I studied. I did nothing. Like on Sundays, I did no watching movies. I did no watching the NFL. I only read the Bible or things related to the Bible, like commentaries on the Bible. I also enforced that on my kids, right? At that time. Was that right? Well, no, I don't think so anymore, but it made me know the Bible a lot. So the paths that I've taken, I do have regrets about some of the twists and turns that I chose that maybe weren't necessarily the smartest, the rightest, the best things that I've said. There's, at the end of the day, I can probably, if you ask me, what do you regret saying today? I could give you 10 things, but, it makes us who we are. I'm not sure, it's like, that's the path I was on. So I don't really regret, I don't run around regretting. I think there's good lessons in all the different things that I did, even if they're things that I say, that maybe wasn't the best decision, but, providentially or thankfully, I can say, hey, there was some really good things that came out of that too.
Well, is there one thing that you would have done differently from your past, or if you would have changed, what would that be?
Oh, actually, I would say, I think, it's really easy. I think it's very easy to be hurtful to women as a man in this world. Like, you can have sex with girls and not be as, you can
present or as
well. I mean, like afterwards, it's like it's not good to hurt girls like emotionally by, I don't know, being an idiot, being a cad. Like, you got to be really careful. There's a lot of emotions tied up in having sex, right? And so, like, one night stands can be hurtful to somebody or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about like violence.
No. Just feelings.
I'm just saying, like, taking that too lightly, you can really harm yourself and others, right?
Yeah, even if they say that they want a one night stand and no emotional attachments, it's hard for women.
Yeah, so I would say that my dealings with my navigation through the maze of relationships, men and women relationships, has been like a pinball machine, not necessarily super enlightened my whole life, right? So
are those some of the failures that you most cherish then? Like, that's sort of the next question. Would that be the same?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a funny one. So it's almost, there's actually somebody was talking about on a podcast I was listening to somewhere or actually there's a book, maybe there's this book I'm reading right now by a Norwegian author named Terje Simonsen. A wonderful book. I'm about halfway through it right now. And it's actually talking about the paranormal realm. And one theory, he's talking about like serious philosophers and thinkers who have talked about experiences with paranormal, or that we would call paranormal. I'm talking like people like Freud or Einstein or famous archaeologists that you might have heard of, or that at least were famous in the 1920s, saying, "Oh yeah, I found those. I wouldn't have found those without this psychic that came up, and told me you need to be digging over there, not over here."
Yeah.
So anyway, one of the theories that I read in that book is that actually it's possible that everything that you're encountering, time is an illusion. Like, a lot of these questions are about, your timeline or your personal timeline. And some people have said, it's possible that these premonitions are because time is an illusion and everything's actually happening right now. In some point in time, like your 20-year-old self might be, you might be, you might be with a girl that you were with when you were 20, but that's in a different time. Right, it's happening right now, but your little sense of time, you're in a different point on the timeline, but it's all like happening at once. So I don't know if that's the right way to answer that question, but it's almost like
it's a fun way.
There is no right or wrong.
If everything's happening right now, it's like it's already stretched out in front of you. You just haven't gotten to it yet. It's already stretched out behind you. You just already passed through it, but it's actually, the gods don't see it the same way we see it. That's why they can tell you what's going to happen, or that's why they're like, actually, this is something that Laird Scranton has talked about with the Dogon. He says, the gods, they say that the gods basically see everything. It's kind of like when you're looking at a time-lapse photography of a superhighway in a rush hour or something, and it's all just lines of red lights going one way and headlights coming the other way. You experience it like as a film, but really the film is happening all at once to someone who's outside. So the gods, they can see everything that's going to happen, but they can't really change it except through us. We're down here in time, so we can act. We're the only ones who can act in this time. So yeah, maybe if you change one little thing, it changes the whole world. I don't know. I'd be careful about like going back and changing it. But it's like, I don't know. It's almost that question. A question like opens up all kinds of weird things. It's almost like, yeah, we're in this time. You got to do the best you can at any given moment. But I don't know that it's all that healthy. It's kind of like after the poker game is over, going back and saying, well, what would have happened if I drew 3 cards? It's like, hey, don't even do that. That's called rabbit hunting. You're not supposed to do that. It's like, just play the hand. And then afterwards, if you didn't take 3 cards and you should have taken 2 cards, well, you got to move on to the next one. I don't know.
I'll let you play God here for a second and go with What institutions of society or structural aspect of modern life would you change given the chance?
Yeah, that's a that's a great question.
It is a great question. A really wise man sent that question to us.
I think a really wise person suggested that one. I'm overjoyed that you accepted that question. So I would say, for sure, it's the neo-feudalism, the structures that are basically what I would call the conspiracy against the gods. Okay, I'm not explaining myself too well, but it's this privatization of things that belong to everybody that has, I think, impoverished and is taking away the resources that belong to everybody. So I talked about this in the Black Budget show, but the economists of the 1800s were all about providing infrastructure through the government, not providing burritos. That's something, burrito restaurants can compete with each other, but providing the infrastructure. But what we've had is like a reaction against that to such an extreme, and people who think that they're libertarian think, oh yeah, I'm for freedom. Actually, that's removing all the restrictions against. Yeah, it's like removing the restrictions against the giants that are going to squash the people and take everything for themselves. So let me dial it down a little bit more. I mean, like the obstacles, like if you privatize prisons like you have in the United States, it's such a bad idea. The United States has less than 5% of the world, and we've got 25% of the imprisoned people in the United States. There's obviously something seriously wrong, right? There's 7 billion people in the world, so 10% of that would be 700 million. 5% of that would be 350 million. I don't even think we have 350 million in the US. We have like 330 million. So that's less than 5%, and yet we have 25% of the people imprisoned. And it's a symptom. It's like a metaphor of what's going on. But where you've got people who are like, oh, I can't leave this job because I won't have health care. Or you've got people who are saying, we all have friends who have got a GoFundMe campaign to please help save my kid or pay for the medical help that my kid needs or my wife needs. This is, supposedly the richest country in the world, and you cannot, and people are living with that threat over their head. So that's what I'm talking about. I'll debate any of the neo-feudalists on this point. That are it's like there should be what I would change structurally is I would tax the rentiers. That means the toll booth collectors. I would tax that, and then I would what has happened in the 20th century is a shifting of the tax burden off of unearned income and onto earned income. And then they say, well, if you want any of these things like healthcare, we're going to have to tax you more. And that's the trick that they play. It's actually, what you should do is move the tax canon off of earning an income and take the tax. This is what the 1800s economists were all about, from the basically the feudalistic. The 1700s and 1800s is all about getting rid of feudalism, which was basically people just sitting around saying, hey, when do the serfs pay their next tax? While I go hunting in the field. So they were all about getting rid of those structures where it's basically you just sit back and skim off of somebody else's work. That was unearned income. So that's what you have to tax. But what we've done is we've untaxed all those things, like massive real estate holdings where you're just renting the real estate out to someone else. And we've taxed earned income. And then we've said, oh, there's not enough money for you to have Social Security. So you have to like drive down the street and see billboards saying, you're not saving enough for retirement. You're going to have to eat cat food if you don't come into this financial institution and start saving for retirement. Why the heck is that? Why are the roads falling apart? Why are the, why there should be, I'm not even explaining this very well. And I kind of tried to put down some notes, but the structural things, yeah, we need to work on our own individual household things, but your household is going to get overwhelmed by the flood of this problem if we don't address it. It's like neoliberalism, and it doesn't have to be that way. Those structures can be changed very easily. It's been a backlash and a campaign to put these structures into place basically since the 70s and early 80s is when they really flipped the switch on it, was when Reagan came to power in the US, and in England it was Margaret Thatcher. And they put this in, and Margaret Thatcher said, there is no alternative. This is the only way. And they basically said, we got to privatize everything. We got to privatize it. And so, and actually the biggest one is the banks. You've had Ellen Brown on who talks about public banking. There should be a public banking option, and that would enable people to go, if you want to start a business, why shouldn't you be able to go get access to capital and start a business, right? So the way it is right now is like choking the people. And then they say, oh, you got to live with austerity. That's what they're imposing on Europe as they like crush the life out of Greece. They say, oh, you just need more austerity. And all those pensions that you thought you were working, that was part of the contract, we have to cut those back in order to pay off the banks. It's actually it's fairly complicated to kind of explain it, but that's the structural thing. It's not a hard thing to fix.
Yeah.
The way to fix it is known. That's what I would fix. And I'm not talking about creating a communist socialist utopia. I'm talking about the things that belong to the public should not be privatized.
Yeah.
And those things have been, and that's why households today are working 3 jobs in a household of, two, a man and a wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever.
Well, yeah.
Just to try and have this a standard of living less than what was 40 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
So, I mean, with that kind of being said, like in going into the next question a little bit, what does it mean like to be a man in today's world? And I guess how would you, like, as you were talking about the institutions, how would you bring about that, like, as a advice for a man kind of wanting that?
Yeah. So I guess that's what you're exploring in this show, and I'm not holding myself up as a paragon of it, but I'll tell you that one thing I have done is studied a lot of the ancient myths, my whole life really, and I think it's this, in one sense, it's the same as ever, but obviously there's differences on the surface. But when I say in one sense it's the same as ever, what is a man? What are the characteristics of a man? And it's, you are supposed to be fighting for what's right. Now, there's a twisted aspect to that too. And I wrote about this actually in a blog post that I think is a pretty good one. And I was going back to it when I was preparing for the show, because I knew that was going to be a question. I mean, you did put them up on the Twitter feed. So, but I wrote about the movie Planet of the Apes, and I'll get back to the myths in a second. But Planet of the Apes, 1968 version, I'm talking about. There's the gorillas. Like each one of the ape categories is doing a twisted version of what they're supposed to be doing. Like the chimpanzees are like the knowledge workers. They're supposed to be seeking knowledge, but instead they're actually like covering up the knowledge in order to, to continue the regime of lies that the orangutans are putting on the people. The orangutans are like they're like in touch with the symbols and the ancient scriptures, but instead of like telling the truth, they're foisting an elaborate lie on everybody. But the gorillas, they're like the warriors. They're like the soldiers, and and they're powerful, right? Why did they use gorillas for Planet of the Apes? Because gorillas are bad to the bone. I mean, if you were thrown into a enclosure with a gorilla and he was mad at you for some reason, good luck, forget it. They're huge, if you've seen gorillas. But why are men given those kind of strength? Why is men given the strength and the different attributes that we have for things like protect the weak? That's the proper role. So in this blog post I wrote, it was called "Wake Up, Gorillas, Don't Perpetrate Violence." You're supposed to protect the weak. You're supposed to stop violence and repel invaders. That's what you're given those kinds of things for. But the twisted role is what I talked about, the proper role and the twisted role of each of these groups. The twisted role of that aspect of your masculinity, let's say, is instead of protecting the weak, is compel obedience. And you can think about this like as a father, you're given so much great responsibility as a father. You're supposed to protect the weak, repel invaders, protect your family, but it can so easily get twisted into compel obedience, terrify the populace, imprison dissenters. That's what's going on in the Planet of the Apes. Anybody who speaks out gets, thrown into a cage, is what happens to Charlton Heston in the movie, right? So the twisted version is what, that's what we can too easily fall into. We have to watch for that. But there's a proper role for all those things. And that's what I think in the ancient myths, it shows us kings and it shows us tyrants. Jordan Peterson talks about that. And I think he's right on that level. I think he's wrong on the societal level. I think he's on the right wing of the societal level, but he's absolutely right on the household level. But leaving that aside, I just finished this book on the Norse myths, and I love Norse myths, and of course they've been twisted into all kinds of. They've been twisted into, like, hate groups want to glom onto the Norse myths and say that that the Norse myths are their special thing. I don't think the Norse myths are teaching that at all, any more than any of the other myths. But in the Norse myths, there's this thing about going to Valhalla or going to hell. And hell, in that case, is spelled with one L. It's the realm of this offspring of Loki. So Loki has 3 children in the Norse myths. One is the Midgard serpent. One is Fenris or Fenrir, the wolf, the big wolf that's going to devour the world at the end at Ragnarok. And then one is Hel, this half, decaying corpse, half just very, not too much is said about her, but she's one of the offspring of Loki. And it's said that, if you die on your bed of old age or of sickness, then you end up in Hel's kingdom. But if you die in battle, then you end up in Valhalla, and it's feasting every night, and it's fighting all day, and it's in the hall of Odin. The mead, the beer never runs out. It's barbecued pork sandwiches every night, and then in the next day, the boar is magically reconstituted. So it's like endless abundance and fighting all day long. And even if you hack off your friend's arm or his head, you just put at the end of the day when the dinner bell rings, just put his head back on, and he's good to go for the feast. And what are they talking about? I don't think it means that you have to die in battle or you end up in the kingdom of hell. And by the way, they describe Hel's kingdom as sickness. Her bed is known as sickness. Her table is known as hunger. It's all these horrible things. Well, what are they talking about? I think it's really talking about the fight that we're supposed to be doing, the fight for truth. If you devote your life to fighting for what's true and what's right, the right version of what you're supposed to be doing as a man, that's what you're supposed to be doing. But otherwise, you'll be back here again to do it over.
So is that the biggest mistake modern men are making then? Is that the twisted path you're talking about?
Well, I think we've definitely been misled by lies. So I think we have to be fighting for the truth. I think a lot of the way you get modern men and women to be not outraged about the things that are going on is to steer them into, the pathways that you want using lies, rather than letting them follow those. I think that people naturally will be outraged by wrongdoing and by injustice. I think that I think a lot of the problems that we're talking about when you say modern man, I think are problems in like US and Canada. I don't think people in, let's say, Nicaragua or Colombia are too much under the illusion that the US is fighting for peace and freedom. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it could be expanded to, I mean, a lot of other, Europe and all of Europe and Australia. And I mean, there's a lot of, modern man is
Western
pretty,
world,
the
probably.
Western.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's ever been any different. That I think we're down here to fight against lies and for the truth. But I don't think it's ever been so easy. I don't think it's ever been
So easy to what?
I don't think it's ever been that easy to do. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's like, oh, we're living in the time of lies. Well, I don't know. Try the 1500s maybe, and see if you felt any. You speak out in some of those.
I think the difference is I don't think they knew they were in that. I mean, now we know we are. I don't know if people realized they were living in lies before. I feel like it's more transparent now, which adds a different challenge to it.
Yeah, I guess so. But I guess the counter to that. No, I mean, I think this is a great discussion. So I'm not having the answer, but I would say as we chew on that thought, okay, then what are we doing about it? It's kind of like, you can get really upset and angry, and you should, about what happened. It was genocide of the Native Americans, right, in the 1800s. And you say, yeah, if I'd have lived then, I would have stood up against it, or I would have seen through what was going on. What were the lies that they foisted on people to keep the people on the Eastern Seaboard, were being told, hey, it's manifest destiny. We need to get to Missouri. Okay, now we need to get to California or whatever. Actually, they drew a line at the Mississippi River and said, we won't go beyond that. Andrew Jackson said, we'll just go up to the Mississippi River. That'll be the edge of, well, that didn't last for very long. They decided they wanted stuff on the west of that too. And and there was a gold rush in California, right? But how come the people didn't say, hey, this is not right? Well, are we doing any better today? You say, well, yeah, if I'd have lived back then, I would have spoke up. Well, okay, but are we against the perpetration of that same pattern in places that it's being perpetrated? Maybe you could argue
we are. Yeah, you could argue we are. I mean, you could argue there's more of a resistance and an outspokenness now than ever, probably. But I don't know
the ability to.
At least
we're podcasting about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that I think that we're chewing on a really important subject here, and I think that we're right in that that's what we should be doing. And that we've got the opportunity to do that. And that's so when the Norse myths say, don't worry about dying in battle, you'll go to Valhalla. I think we can take that to our modern time and say, okay, this doesn't mean that I have to go out and get into big battles with axes and, Conan the Barbarian type lifestyle in order to go to Valhalla. I think what it means is that's our job. We're supposed to be doing the right form of what the gorillas in Planet of the Apes, what's their strength? Protect the weak, stop violence, stand up for what's right, instead of just go along with, hey, this is what the orangutans say to do, and if they said to put you in jail, so I'm going to do it. And we got to, I think what it means to be a man is always the same, but it takes on a different form in different time periods, but I think we can still find in those ancient myths the pattern. They're not talking about, because if they're all related to the stars, which I'm more than convinced that they are, they're not literal. They are teaching esoteric truths. We are supposed to be wrestling down here with these deep issues, and we're supposed to be seeking the truth and seeking to be connected with our higher self, not getting dragged down into, as it's so easy to do, the behavior of the lower self.
Right on.
Bingo, bango. Wow, big thanks for coming on the show, Dave, and for your well thought out answers.
Multiple answers to each question.
Yeah,
Awesome.
excellent.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always a great pleasure and privilege to talk to you guys.
Of course, head over to mantranscending.com today. Sign up for a membership, and you will get access to the second half of the show. We're going to talk about our 5 bonus questions and reflect on the questions a little bit, and as well as get access to a bunch more stuff. So check that out today. And thanks for listening, guys.
All right, so to get on with the extra questions here, David, what would you tell your teenage self?
Hey, that's a funny one. So actually, it kind of segues into the last
I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, what? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo,
Why
what?
is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why? I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo,
Why is
why?
there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes. And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't want no Hawaii.
Why?
I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, why? I don't want no Hawaii. I don't want no Hawaii. Yo, why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.